Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Man Alone Solo Role Playing YouTube channel. As you can see here, I finally did it. I extended my playing area by, I guess it's now 2 feet by 2 feet here. Guess it's clipped off a little bit, but in order to achieve this, I went through just about every combination of different things I could possibly do. I tried to smush 5 leagues down to like an 8 by 11 sheet of paper. I bought a modular dungeon that I built. In fact, I have that right here. This is, I think, Tomb of Annihilation, Pathfinder. And this one is really cool, except the fact that, like, this is, I don't know, 80% of the pieces available. And if you, like, here's everything that's left. So I guess I could maybe extend it out to, like, another kind of room. And so as cool as this is, it's like $70 for 1, 2, 3 bathrooms, a living room, and a hallway. And you know, I that is pretty cool. I guess I could reconfigure it, but it doesn't really snap together all that well. So bottom line is, I did all this. I tried so many different things because I have always struggled with wargaming. I've always wanted to do it, but I always feel outclassed by it. I always feel like there was some memo in 1997 to start collecting terrain, and I missed it. And even the things that people will say, like when people go, "Hey, I'm looking to get into wargaming. What do I do?" Oh, well, just go ahead and take terrain and take cardboard boxes and make terrain out of that and everything. And I'm always thinking, like, if that's always a suggestion, why am I never seeing that on YouTube? Well, I have no doubt that it exists. I have no doubt that there are people out there that are using really nice cardboard box terrain that they've made, or terrain that they've just literally, there's like a Nike sign on the box. The reason that people don't do that is because it likely looks like dead, right? And so my thought was, if there's one service I could do to the community here, it is try to figure out how to play a miniature game for people like me who have no terrain and no terraining, making terrain, who have no storehouses of rolling hills and rivers and farmhouses. You know, there's always, oh yeah, just whatever terrain you have lying around. None. I have none. So this is something for me that I think keeps a lot of people out of it. And normally, for a lot of those people, they don't mind, just given the impressions of people who do not play miniature wargaming. I think there's a feeling of like, yeah, I'm not so interested in it. And I think the reason for that is because it has a certain reputation. There is a certain, and that's not to say it's a bad reputation. I'm just saying it calls a certain experience to mind. And I think there is definitely a crossover of people who want to play miniature games and people who don't. And I think one of the reasons that the people who don't would be because they not only are they not interested in maybe the competitive aspect of it, and I know those who play miniature war games, I know that it's not all like that. I'm just saying this is sort of the impression that people might have. And the other thing is that miniature games maybe don't rely on story as much. You know, it's just a series of scenes, and these scenes are combat. And even if people kind of like tabletop role-playing combat, they might feel as though, you know, just only doing that is not giving them a complete feeling of what they want to get out of a game. and then add to that all the sort of like overhead cost and knowledge, whether that's real or perceived. I think what the end result is, you have a lot of people that are like, not for me. And damn it. Just one moment. The reason why I think that's a shame is because not all miniature games are Warhammer or Corvus Belli or Trench Crusade. If you're and I get it if you're not into those kind of experiences, because I think about it like this. At my FLGS, you have like upstairs is tons of like Magic the Gathering on one side, and the other side is board games and TTRPGs. And then the lower floor, there's models and stuff as well, like where you buy the packages. But then the lower floor, the ground floor of the building, is like 10 wargaming tables. And these tables are massive. They're like pool tables. That's how big they are. And so for somebody who, I have no history playing miniature war games, and B, I'm not very crafty, and also C, I only have a few friends that play, and one of them is currently living in Japan. And so it's like, it's just hard to imagine investing myself in that a lot. And we have played games there. I've played a couple games there of 40K, of Warhammer Underworlds. But it's just, I get it. I just want to say, that's what I want to say, is that I get it if you're somebody that's like, not for me. But this is why I would go through the effort to show you a way to do this that is more simplified, that is within your reach financially, that is within your reach from a like technical perspective. And that is one of the greatest uses of an idiot like me, is like showing you how an idiot might do something successfully. There's no greater inspiration, right? And so I seriously, I have like 5 videos. Not all of them are like fully narrated videos and stuff, but I recorded myself in various configurations. I showed you that dungeon that I put together. I did one where I actually tried to use like I do have some Warhammer terrain, and I was like, okay, maybe I could like put this stuff around. I don't know what the hell this is. And even though it wasn't like fantasy stuff, I put that up. I might even still use these things, but just because this could be like a wall. Who cares? There's like rocks. If you wash them, those are actually model rocks. I found a pack of 4 model rocks. But I would say that the total cost of everything I'm going to use here today, not counting like the book here, less than $100. Probably far less. In fact, the biggest cost is probably these 2 books, and this is 2 books right here. And I want to actually show you this before I go any further, because this, in a lot of ways, was what kind of cracked the code for me, is these books. And let me show you the package that they come in. So you might be familiar with these are sort of a universal available thing, this big book of battle mats. This one is rooms, vaults, chambers. And this one right here is nice and big, except you can see that it's not even, maybe it's 2/3 the size of this one. And this is really, again, this is really good, but the consensus is, and I know there are exceptions to this, but pretty much I looked into this a lot. Like over a series of months, I've been looking at different examples of miniature games that are played on a smaller surface. And let me just say, first of all, one of the hardest search subjects ever, which is like mini miniature game, micro miniature mini skirmish war game, and so There are examples of some games that are played on a surface that's smaller than 2 feet by 2 feet. There's Demon Ship by Blacksite Studios. There's a Napoleonic War one that's kind of played on, if I were to put this and this together, like a sort of 1 by 2. And there's some, there's a lot of people who are happy to go both ways on it when people ask in chat room or forums, for example. I'm looking, I have limited space, or I'd like to do something portable. What can I do? And you'll generally get like two responses. The first one will be like, yeah, it could be any size you want. All you got to do is scale it down. Take everything in the game and just mathematically, if you're going to have something that a game that's normally 2 feet by 2 feet, and the character's movement is 4 inches, and you want to make it 1 foot by 1 foot, the character is 2 inches of movement or whatever. And technically that's possible. I'll talk about some of the issues with that, but then the other group will be like, no, you really can't play a miniature game on a board smaller than 2 by 2. And in fact, 2 by 2 is often a little bit crammed. If you have a game that involves, more than a team of 6 or 7 people on both sides. So the first group is correct. Like, you can scale things down. I could play 5 Leagues from the Borderland, 5 Parsecs from Home. I could play it here. I could technically play it here. I could technically play it like here. But the issue is a few things. Number one, the math is not always as clean as 4 inches to 2. That's the first thing, is that you're going to start running into things that will be a bit confusing, right? You're going to start running into, because there's not only movement, there's shooting range, and then there's like different things if your character is slowed on a certain type of terrain. And if that terrain affects their movement, then you have to modify that, as well as the character's encumbrance and stuff like that. And then, this is obviously preposterous to get it this small, but just say you were to play a miniatures game here, right? Like, you could come up with some rules for this. It's probably not going to have many. I mean, it's not even enough squares to play a full game of tic-tac-toe, is it? Yeah, you're missing one here, but you could do it. But then the terrain is a good example. Like, when I'm moving through this terrain, I am slow. I can only move half the distance. It's like, well, half the distance is 1 square. So now you're saying I can only move half that, so I can only move half the square. So now I've got to like track half movements. And then there's also the issue of cover. And cover often has to take up space. There are certain things you can't move through. You also need to be able to measure line of sight and like distance between two things to make sure that a shot can go through. And so it just gets very tricky on something this small, where you're trying, and you can laser sight these things and stuff. But at the point that you're getting laser sighting tools to do this, you have to be wondering, why am I doing that, and I'm not also just getting a larger table or tabletop, right? And so you could do this, and I tried to do this. And let me say this, if you want to do something like that, you can, especially for solo play, because in solo play, you can move half a square. That's not a problem, right? Because the only person, like, you're not going to have someone there saying, "Oh, no, I want to remeasure, or I want a referee's opinion." That's you. So you could do whatever you want. It's just, it gets a little dicey. And so 2 feet by 2 feet seems to be the right move here. But I have had some success with non-square boards as well. So like I had a pretty good game before I got this thing with like 2 spaces like this, um, and then a third one that was in the middle and was oblong. You just need space for there to be separation of the factions, places for them to hide. You need different things that change the dynamics and the odds of different things happening, and you need also enough space for people to move through differences, move through different terrains, different heights, different levels of vulnerability, and especially for 5 Leagues. This is 5 League's new compendium here. The last section is a standalone game called Deep Below. And that's the one I'm going to show because it's a dungeon crawling specific uh, iteration of 5 Leagues, which I think is even better for a smaller game board, because in a dungeon it's expected that you're gonna have more cramped spaces, right? You're gonna be in this hallway right here. That's not abnormal. Whereas if you were trying to play like uh, a colonial era musket war game, it's not going to make a lot of sense for 2 guys to be like here and it's like draw, aim, fire, right? And so this gives us some more space, some more options, and it allows there to be an increase in strategy that for me at least, and especially for solo play, is sufficient. Okay, it's sufficient. And so what I was going to say, of course, didn't get to it, introduced it, but didn't get to it. That's my trademark move. Something like this is nice, and this company makes even bigger ones than this. But as I looked at the bigger one, and I will say there's one that's probably like this tall. I will say compared to this, these two right here, it probably is the same width and maybe comes up to here. And that for that one, I was like, see, that's better, but it almost is like not small enough to fit where I need it to fit, and not big enough to have that much advantage over a setup like this, right? And this was the one, and I got it from Noble Knight Games. Thank you for sponsoring the channel. These two together, and they were sleeved in here. It's a little larger than like a record. And when you close them, both of them fit into here. And then here's the best part about this. You have book 1 and book 2, and they, regardless of the configuration, sometimes you'll have to turn them over to make this work, but they will always pretty much run into each other. Okay? Even ones that are a little bit of different type terrain. And I'll show you what I mean by that. And truly, this is where I think this setup here with these 2 books is really special, is that say that I'm dungeon delving, right? And think about like a video game RPG. If you were to sort of consider this to be a map in a video game, role-playing game, right? And you entered here, how long would it take you to like go like that? If your characters were running, that would be pretty short distance, right? And what's cool about this is you get to the end of that and you can flip and go up into here while still keeping this, just in case you're backed into that or whatever, and it still works. And then you move out of the range of that one, and you can go up here, and you can see that even like you might want to again shift it just so that you have a little bit of a different like scene picture or organization for it. But even when they're not sort of matching themes, they still will generally work together. And you can see where the walls end right there. It works really well. And so you have tons and tons of combinations, and you have some basic maps up front, but it just allows you to have a diversity of different spaces to move in. and you can think of it as a very, very long dungeon. Okay. And, and so I think that maps and terrain are the first thing that um, get in people's way. They say, I don't have terrain. I don't have a map. I don't have space for it. So is this like the most immersive way to play this? Of course not. Of course not. Like if I spent 2 years, building a replica of, the Imperial Palace from Warhammer 40K, like, of course that's more immersive than this. Of course that's more detailed. But the distance between this and that in terms of effort, materials, resources, and time is massive. And the difference in terms of like enjoyment, I'm not convinced it's that massive. I think that as long as you are playing a game that you like, and you have enough of a scene picture to immerse yourself in it, I think you're golden. And for me, all I needed was something like more than this. I just needed a little something more than this, and I think something like this does it. So map. The question of terrain, I think probably you would really benefit yourself. There is stuff like this that is the dungeon tiles. One of the most affordable things you can get from Wizards of the Coast is, and one of the only things I would recommend buying from them, just because they have 3 of these sets, and they are the size, they're about half the height of a shoebox, and they are stacked with this flat pack cardboard stuff. I think it's called Dungeon Tiles Reimagine. And if you ever see this box at the store, if you're like me and you just skip over the D&D section, see if you can find these boxes. I'll show you one of them, and they pretty much all look similar. Actually, had both of them right next to each other. So this is like the filled box. It has something that wraps around it. The box in and of itself can be elevated terrain on a map, which is really nice. It's hard to see, but there is a grid there. I wish it was more definitive squares. I think that's one thing. But when you open these boxes, they're just massive. And one thing that I will say, and this is me willing to embarrass myself of my ignorance and naivety, just in case anyone else is as confused as I am about this kind of stuff. I thought that when you had maps like this, you had to jigsaw puzzle all of these together to create this big spread across your table. Not only is that really, really unwieldy because they're not interlocking, and so you're trying to you're trying to keep these things from shifting and falling, and there's all these little things. Not only is it very unreliable, it's so hard to get it to work because it just is like tons of different kind of pieces, and they get stranger and stranger as you go through the box. And so I was trying to, be like, okay, I'll put a river over here, and then I'll go, oh, wait a minute. So that doesn't connect because that river looks like it ends. So now I got to find one that's okay, like this, a separate one. All right. Yeah, I guess. And then I would get to this point. I'd be like, all right, but where, so I need a bridge. So the bridge is just next to, if that has happened to you, just know that what can happen instead is that you can just use these on a map like this and use them as terrain. And you see these little arrows here just mean that there is an elevation involved. And just place them there. And there, you have some terrain. These boxes are like less than $30 each. And there's a dungeon one, there's an overland one, and there's a desert one. The desert one's the only one I didn't get. Just don't have many games that I'm playing in that environment. But the dungeon one, incredible. But again, like some of these pieces here, I don't think I'm going to be able to build this, but could I say there's a staircase right here that, and in order to get into this room, you have to go, yeah, that's what you could use it for. And that way, as long as you are comfortable with abstracting the height of things, the organization of things, what you're really trying to get is just like variation, diversity of environments. And so each of these, they have double-sided things, like they have some interesting stuff here, and then there's always something on the other side. Yes, I know I don't like even giving money to WotC, and so if that's the case, forget, just don't do it if you don't want to. But try not to what is the phrase, like drink poison to poison someone else. You know, there's a lot of ways to do good, and there's a lot of ways to deprive yourself of experiences for something that I'm not going to get into it. Okay, now miniatures is another thing, because I do think that terrain-wise, also, I think I bought for $8 some rocks. These things came in the Pathfinder Tomb of Annihilation, but this is a great example of just like, you just need some things to get cover behind. This is something that you literally could, like, I don't know, use a whatever you want. Here's a flashlight. You know, there needs to just be something people can hide behind. In this case, I will say that unlike the Pathfinder Tomb of Annihilation, which, by the way, I think that was a pretty nice thing. It's good quality. It's just not very usable, and so it's one of those things where it's like, do you want to spend $70 on that and get that limited use, or like, you know, spend $30 more and get a more complete set? Up to you. On the other hand, there's these dirt cheap dungeons, and this one was a little too small, but even so, it's probably just a bit less than what I was able to get from the Tomb of Annihilation. I think it was about $19. And these ones, like, if you're somebody who's like, I really want to build something, you know, if that's really interesting to you, I don't anticipate that a lot of you feel that way. If miniature wargaming has been something you avoid, usually it's not because you're like, I want to build something, but I don't want to buy anything to build. If you've got the itch to build something, that's like a very hard call to deny. But you know, well, who knows? If you want a little bit of something to vary it up a little bit, this is like one of these half height things that you can see everything laid out in front of you. It's really, really quick to build, and I am a big proponent of making your solo play session be enticing and intriguing and make you want to get home from work and get the kids in bed so that you can fumble around with this kind of stuff. You know, it should be whatever you need to do to like make yourself look forward to the experience. I think is great, because it is just it's just such a very nourishing thing. I've had such a horrible week, and I just was able to finally get a moment's peace this evening. And before I started recording, I just started playing. It wasn't a solo tabletop game. It was from the Solo Hero series, kind of like a card deck game called Wraith and the Giants. But even that, it was just like so nice to have that time to myself. And it's because I had some stuff that I look forward to. And so, anyways, you could put together some different things with this, as you could see, some different configurations. And you know, keep your eye out. There's plenty of things. Legos would work really well for this. You just don't have to get it perfect. You know what I mean? It's like whatever is going to work for you will work for you. And whatever vision you have, just go with that vision. There's no right way to do it. And I think that's another thing that really, really held me back from miniature gaming, is I was like, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to embarrass myself in front of myself. Still so weird that happens. But anyways, So these game mats, uh, I think they were like $45 for the pack of 2 of them. And the 5 leagues is, for many of you, I should have said this up top. For many of you, I think that if you really looked at how 5 leagues plays, and I think a lot of people probably do know this because I think a lot of people were introduced to this hobby through Trevor Duvall, who did 5 Parsecs from Home. I just think that this is a game that if you don't like wargaming, this game I think can still very much be of interest to you, and that you should consider giving it a shot because there is just so much more to this game than the combat. Unfortunately, the Deep Below supplement, even though it does work really well for somebody who's a bit newer because it's scaled down rules and it has a lot of mechanics kind of pulled away from it just to focus on the getting people up and running in the gameplay. So that's really nice. However, I do unfortunately think it stripped away some of the more fun mechanics, like some of the stats and stuff like that. However, there's some cool stuff about it. We'll share it. So it's not an oversimplified version of the game or anything like that, but there were some moments where I was setting up my game of it when I was just practicing it, and I was like, "Oh man, really? I don't get to do that." But of course, I can do whatever I want. Right? I'm solo gaming. The things that I think are interesting for outside of the wargaming aspect of things in 5 leagues is there's opportunities for role playing. There's opportunities for developing relationships between the players. There's opportunity to advance your players meaningfully. There's opportunity to create a whole world. Like if you're interested in world building, there's an opportunity to really create a special, bespoke, world for you to exist in. Because the procedural generation, how it works is you're just going to keep on building out. In the case of this game, like your dungeon, but in any game of this, you're also going to have a settlement or a base camp. And this, I really do think as I get more acclimated in the hobby, the more I realize that base building, headquarters expansion, stuff like that is one of the biggest draws for me. I don't know why. I've always liked that in games. I've always liked it when even really simple stuff. You ever played the game Rogue Legacy? You can spend the sort of coins that you get while you're making these castle runs or dungeon runs on expanding your stronghold, and it literally shows that stronghold getting bigger. And there's even opportunities in this to develop out like a town around that. And also, if you wanted to just get a little something for like physical 3D terrain stuff, this could be cool to put together like your base or your headquarters or your stronghold or your castle, and then expanding it out with different rooms. And you could do that gradually as you play. But honestly, terrain pieces like this, just get some stuff that will allow you to create some cover, some variation, and some difficult choices in terms of what direction to go. Because when it's just an open board like this, it's just going to be that weird opening feeling of chess where you're like, hey, you want some, even this here, the walls present some interesting opportunities. And the reason why I wanted to have something like this, not only for combat, but for exploration, is because I wanted it so that when I was traveling and exploring and I encountered an enemy, I wanted to be able to just start the combat. In addition to like making solo sessions special for you, I also recommend getting rid of those moments that you know you're not going to enjoy. And for me, even I have these fantastic. This is so funny. As I'm like going through this stuff, I'm realizing how many different things I tried. So this is Zero One's Boundless City. There's one for a dungeon that's on the way, but this acts very similarly. These cards are all hand drawn. They look gorgeous, and this one is for a city, and each location is numbered, named, and will have several layers to it. Right. So like this is a guild hall, and so you know that's what it looks like, but you can also under it put the other guild hall card so that when you enter it, this isn't here. I have the library on the ready. So say you have the overlay of a city that you lay out with these cards, right? And you have like the library right there and the guild hall. You'd actually stack the cards that represent the different floors so that you know where you're headed, and you're like, okay, I'm going to walk into the library, which is 017, and you know what the rooftop looks like when you're walking down the street here. And then as you enter it, here's the first floor, and you navigate around that. And then if you, I guess this is the ground floor, the first floor, and then a second floor on the back. So these are great, but again, I even got to the point, because these have squares on them, I said, what if I got tiny little blocks and did skirmish, using like those portable checkers magnetic pieces that every kid born in 1986 got to sit in the back of their Chrysler Plymouth Voyager minivan on vacations and play checkers, Chinese checkers, and then backgammon, which nobody in my entire neighborhood knew how to play that, but everyone had a backgammon board. Other ones are, I think these are also by O1. I might be mistaken here, but let's see. Yeah, these are other ones by O1. Just really, really cool stuff. And I, at one point, I was even thinking about getting Battleship and getting the little prongs to put in the Battleship map and use that. One that I'm still very, very tempted by, simply because I've wanted to use this for something for so long, is the Gunderholfen map pack. Now, Gunderholfen is a massive mega dungeon, and it has this separate map pack, but the maps are just so awesome. Here's like the city maps, and then again, it goes into the details of them, and they're so like you can zoom in so much. And then as we get to the back, some of the dungeons back here are like hubba hubba. Here, let me see. Show you this one. Yeah, like you could just have, you could kind of use this as, if you wanted to, use this as like the overlay, and then just use a plain grid to play out combat. But in my test games, I was just kind of like drawing the overland map, because one of the things that makes Deep Below a little bit more doable than the base 5 Leagues from the Borderlands is that rather than doing overland travel, you kind of do it like you travel to between the different worlds in like Mario 3 or Super Mario. You're like, okay, I'm going to go to this world. No, this world, this world. Yep, I'm going to go to this one. Pew, pew, pew. And then you set up the scene, and you set up how many NPCs you set up all these events, and you need to clear 5 of them to proceed. So it's a cool little system. It's lean, but it does have a lot of variety and a lot of advancement, and you can staple that campaign into the broader 5 Leagues from the Borderland. All right. So I think that covers like maps, terrain, rulers. These are just both like 1 foot rulers that I made. don't have to be fancy. There's also, I think, in like if you get the Warhammer starter kit, that's like $35. There's a nice ruler in there that you could use. You could use, well, a ruler that also works. Um, and the last thing is miniatures before we start playing. So let me just talk about my journey, my miniatures journey. So here's my Yndrasta. I just maybe I can turn up the light a little bit. This is Yndrasta, really cool character in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I really like the wings, I I now sort of understand when people post like on miniature painting subreddits and they're like, "Hey guys, this model any good?" And people are like, "That's incredible," because it's like this model is definitely better than other ones I've made, but to me, it still looks so amateur. And so if you've never painted, maybe you're like, What are you kidding me?" But to me, I'm like, it's okay. I don't know how to really do shading and stuff, but I do like the little moss and everything from the tree. It looks really pretty, and the wings are just sort of as I imagine. I was able to put some more mossy base down here that I really like. I'm also trying to put together for 40K like a red Corsairs army. This is my attempt at Huron Blackheart, and so this is. I wanted to show you this to let you know that you do not need to paint miniatures, and you do not need to buy $60 to $100 miniatures to play a game like 5 Leagues from the Borderland. All right, and so I want to show you some alternatives that not only are they more affordable, are they easier, they're probably better for what we're trying to do here. Okay. All right. So the first thing you can do is either through ordering online, ordering just like a kit of miniatures, you can get pre-painted miniatures like this. Okay, and honestly, to the untrained eye, um, does that really look different than this? Because I painted this guy, and this guy came painted, and the cost of this guy, I think there's a bin in my FLGS that you can pull these minis out, and depending on like the color of the sticker on the bottom, like this one is metal. This one was a bit more expensive. I did paint this one. This one was probably $6. Okay. And this guy was probably $2. And he's kind of shooting a Hadoken, you know. Jeez. $4. Barbarian, right? And if you don't want to, I like that I just put like a big red diaper on this Minotaur guy, but yeah, you can get them unpainted. And if you don't know how to paint, if you don't want to paint, just like put a coat of paint, acrylic paint on. Buy 2 colors for your guys and the baddies, just like 2 different colors for it. Okay. You can also like get WizKids will sell these sets. They're overpriced, and also uh, they did not provide me a working battery for this. You're supposed to be able to plug in these lanterns, and they must have been the size of a peanut. And I emailed them and explained myself, and just said I'm really looking forward to this. This is exactly what I need. Would you guys mind just sending a replacement lantern? Because the lanterns, it was actually that they didn't fit, and they said no. And then I said, I really, really would love to share a positive customer service experience. I'm not trying to throw my weight around here because I don't have much weight to throw around. It's not like I have a billion people, but I was like, I would love to. And they wrote another dismissive email to me and then ignored me. So I am happy to tell you that WizKids went out of their way to not be helpful. And also that their products feel cheap and shitty. And they're way overpriced. So only if you can get them on discount. But otherwise, yeah. So this is a little Hobbit guy. These are, I would say, $2 to $6. All right. So that's a good choice. Probably be using that today, just because since it's on camera, I want people to be able to see like what's happening. But another good option is, for instance, Dragonbane or the Cyberpunk starter have these flat packed characters. Dragonbane, in my opinion, is like the best ones of these ever. They're the nicest detail, and what I like about them is they're cut in the shape of the person rather than just a square. Most places will just give you like a square. The One Ring new starter set has some pieces like this, but they just don't have as much character. Dragonbane is so like vivid, and it's just every character is so like their own character. I don't know how else to say it, but that will work. Look, that will work. That fills up a square, and everything you're going to be able to do with a miniature, you're going to be able to do. When I was trying to fit this on one like 8x11 sheet of paper, that was a whole phase. I was like, I'm just going to put it on one sheet of paper for everybody. That's how easy we can make it. I was like using meeples. Why not? Use some meeples. And I even put like my different members of my warband. I put their initials on each meeple so that I was able to tell them apart. And once I find my sheets, I'll also show you that I just like labeled the color of them so that I was able to identify them. If you want to get even more fancy, Severed Books is my absolute favorite producer of these kind of awesome meeples. They have ones for Mothership, like this. And they have ones for like a post-apocalyptic Walking Dead type scenario. But their real gems are two things. Number one is their Merc Borg, unofficial, but like Borg-like bastards that are these sorts of like Merc Borg type characters that are fantastic. There's they also have these Merc Borg type villains, zombies, and one of them is like the big baddie. Yeah, they're really cool. And then also they also have a game that is actually, I believe I kickstarted it some time ago, and I think it's shipping out soon, is Sickest Witch. And those ones are really cool. The characters just look awesome. Like this is one of the protagonists, believe it or not, I believe. And there's an advanced one that's like a crystal. Oh, here's a good one too. And these also work. And in fact, I'm still thinking about using these just because they're just so unique. Oh yeah, this is the one I got. I got like a bonus crystal fighter one in one of my boxes, and it looks really awesome. Check that out. So that's Severed Books, and they have an Etsy store, and they're really cool. Okay. And the last thing is, for probably the cost of one miniature, you can get like a set of game pieces with your own things that you can print out, or you just write different names on it. The real show, guys, it's in your head. That's where the show's happening. So all this stuff is to remind you of like what the set looks like for the movie playing in your head. All right. Let's move on to part 2. This is 5 Leagues from the Borderlands, Deep Below. Okay, guys, after 3 years, I figured out that I can do this. All right, so now that we've gone over some of the considerations for a smaller scale war game, skirmish game, etc., next I want to talk about just briefly how to play 5 leagues from the Borderlands deep below, what's included in the game, what's different from the traditional 5 leagues. Although I'm not going to focus too much on that just because this is its own game. You can pick up this and play the game without having the 5 leagues core rules, okay? And then finally, I'm just going to show you, like, so that you can get started on your campaign, how, after making my warband, how I would deploy that warband and start a campaign, okay? Because that's really what is the hardest part of a game, right? Is like getting into the loop. It's easy to get up to the point of starting, but I want you to go beyond that threshold, okay? So first things first, this game is really, really easy to know 90% of what it takes to play this game, okay? And I say that not for the reasons that others might say it, because others, I could get frustrated by that. You know, like what I just said can come off as very frustrating when I've tried to understand a game and I don't, and someone's like, this game is so easy. So I want to be specific. 90% of what it takes to play this game is very simple. 10% takes a little bit of figuring, especially if you don't have someone to guide you through it, especially if you don't have examples, especially if you haven't played this kind of game before. That stuff too, you can get it, we'll get it down. Or some of it is like, you know, like when you're learning any subject, there's some stuff that until you get the hang of it, you just go to the manual when it comes up and figure it out. But I think that you will, if I do a good job explaining this, which I won't, I'm terrible at explaining things, but if I do even a half decent job at explaining it, I think you'll be delighted to see that in addition to this being a miniatures game, they managed to put a hell of a tabletop role-playing game under it. And that's why I really like it, and that's why I'm going through what it takes. Now, if you want to see this game in all of its grandeur, I'd be remiss not to tell you to check out Peachy's channel. Peachy was a Warhammer like model painter, part of this sort of like cohort of all just wonderful people who have their own YouTube channels now. There's another one, Rogue Hobbies, is really great. And Peachy is, you know, obviously has just this like tons and tons of amazing terrain and miniatures, and they're painted awesome. And so that's not what this video is for. This video is not a competitive video to that. It's an alternative approach in case you don't have those tools at your disposal, okay? So because of that, I want to highlight some of the really cool things about this game that, again, I think sometimes it's one or the other. You either have a really well-made game or you have a really nice-looking game, etc. This game does it all right? So first things first, our warband is going to have... they're all going to get the same stats to start. When we decide who is what, and we can either, in terms of like origin, are they human, Durscon, Windspite Dwarfs, Grey Elves, or Weaslings? And this is like the archetypes here. You can either do a straight up and down roll for that, where it's like roll a D100 and every 20 it's a different one. Or you can do it weighted to the game and the prevalence of that archetype in the game. So for instance, rolling 1 to 30 will get a human. So it's like 30 of the options out of 100 are human, whereas only 15 of the options are Durscon, 10 of the options are Grey Elves, and 15 are Weaslings, and another 30 are Windspite Dwarves. There's one thing that was a little bit confusing for me, and I want to let you know about this just in case you decide to play. There's a line in the game that says, you know, just so that you're aware of some of these other rules from the 5 Leagues core game, these rules are placed in parentheses. You can read them if you want, but you don't have to. And so while I was reading through this, I was looking for parentheses, and uh, it's not parentheses, it's boxes. And so I have a feeling most of you will not be as like dense and literal as I was. But after each of these character archetypes, there's these like additional boosts or power-ups that are specific to the core game. And I added all of them to my warband because I was like, yeah, okay. So like I also get this, I get +1 to all speech. And I did think it was weird because I was like +1 to speech, and yet there's no like speech thing here. What's up with that? That's because it's from the core game. Um, the other thing that I encourage you to consider is to set a minimum in terms of how many dwarves you have in your party. Um, I I have a feeling that there is one of you who is very knowledgeable and much more attuned to things like this than I am. But uh, let me say that I don't believe in perfect balance. Like, I don't believe that that's the goal of a game. To be like, oh, every character has to have the equal chance of like, everyone's character. Like when you reduce everything to its lowest form, everyone should be equal. I don't believe that. I don't believe that a bard should be as good at destroying people as a sorcerer or a barbarian. I think a bard should be good at singing. And it's just like if you have a group of people IRL, everyone brings a different thing. Some people, they bring more of the all around stuff. Some people, they really are the front lines of whatever task that is. And some people, they play support roles, and I like that. I think it's good. We should focus on having characters play themselves rather than playing like the best version of anything. Or I should say, they should be playing the best version of themselves, not the best thing. Okay. But I'm just very, I guess I get, I don't mind when there is imbalance on the individual level. So that's to say, if I roll up 3 characters in say 5e, and I just have a character that just did not have great rolls. And it's like the worst type of rolls where they're not low enough to re-roll out of pity, but you get like 11, 11, 10, 11. You're like, ugh. And then somebody else gets 16, 15, 16, and you're like, okay, you know, so it goes. It's imbalanced, but we're here to write a story. We're here to create a story. We're here to play. And even if you're a min maxer or anything like that, um, you don't get a hand of poker redealt if you're like, I didn't get any face cards. Can we do it again and get? It's a game, all right. And so, anyways, on that level, I think it's okay. But this is a little bit frustrating for me, where a whole category of player is so definitively disadvantaged compared to another one, especially in this game when there is just not that many stats. I mean, you basically have agility, speed, combat skill, which is a catch-all. We'll talk about that. Toughness, armor, luck, will, recovery. So there's no speech, there's no perception, there's none of that other sort of stuff, which again might affect your ability to role play in Deep Below. So cost benefit. But let me just keep this brief because I have a feeling if I don't, I could suddenly do 80 minutes of blathering about this. Each of these have like these sections at the end of their descriptions that say, here's like a little extra thing. And each of these things are supposed to be like a rose and a thorn. You know, I think a common or a common example of like a rose thorn upgrade would be something like a berserk mode, right? Like many games will have something that's like your character can go into berserk mode once per combat. When they do this, they can roll all damage rolls with advantage. However, the next turn maybe They can't do anything the next turn, or they are disadvantaged with their armor for the rest of combat. And I like that. It's like, it's a little bit of a risk. It's a gamble, but it promotes like strategic play, choosing the right window to do something that pays off. Fine. But the dwarf, the Windspite dwarf clan, their rose is that the rune magic, which is the magic system of this game, which is fine. It's kind of like, it's weirdly sort of like Merkborg in that you cast spells by using runes, and anybody can use them, but not everyone can make them until they do 3 days of like silent prayer, and then they become, we'll talk about it, a rune, what is it called? A rune mystic. But when somebody uses one of these runes, like that are tracked right here, like a healing rune, it counts as their action. But the dwarves can use it, and it doesn't count as their action. That's significant, right? I mean, like, some of these are very powerful, and you can just, as a dwarf, you can just use them and then attack. That's big. The thorn of that is they have another thing that's called deliberate, which is that you reduce the dash of dwarf characters by 2 inches, meaning it starts at 0. Now, what that just means is that a dwarf cannot dash. They can't. I'm sure many of you are familiar with dash, but just so that I'm sure everyone understands, the usual system of how dash works in games is if your character can move 4 squares, then they can also attack. Or if they dash, they can move again, but then they can't attack. In many games, it's just double. So you can move 4, and if you dash, you can move 4 again. This game has a half dash system where it's like if you move 4 and want to use up your whole turn, you can move 6. All right, so +2. This means that a dwarf just can move whatever their movement is. All right, which they're dwarves. They're stout. They are usually quite big and bulky, and so they are more of a tank, right? So, nevertheless, Rose and a Thorn, that we're in dungeons and mines, so it kind of makes sense that the dwarves have a bit of an upper hand in this series of adventures. The humans have what's called Adventurer's Fortune. And this means in the post-combat phase, you can roll an injury roll, which is that if you have an injury, you roll to see like if you broke your foot or knocked your tooth out or fractured your skull. I don't think those are actual ones that are in here, but stuff like that. And as a human, you can re-roll that. Except if it's worse, you have to keep the worse result. And if you use the ability, regardless of if it helps you or hurts you, you transfer an injury onto a piece of your equipment. Like your sword is damaged, and if it's already poor quality or whatever, it's broken. So you have the ability, you're going to have an injury. You can maybe improve it, but you also maybe risk that it gets worse, and regardless of whether or not you break your weapon or armor. That sucks. I'd rather not have an ability. And then under that, you got to read what they have in 5 leagues, which is they can select any background. They add +1 to all speech. Choosing any background that gives you a wide variety of upgrades. None of these are really that significant upgrade-wise. It's very small toggles, which I also am kind of like, I wish they were like a little more meaningful, just especially I have 8 characters and I don't really differentiate them. But folks, that's not all. Is that the dwarf also has a third thing. They also have Stalwart. Listen to this. So in addition to casting magic with no action, Dwarves are never affected by fear, even from magical origins. They cannot be physically moved by magic under any circumstance. So if there's a spell that's like that pushes them back, nope. And no enemy may ever push or knock them back through a special ability, but this does not apply to normal retreats in hand-to-hand combat, which is... So that is a significant gap, to the point that, and the reason I don't like that is because if it's the feels bad man rule. You know, it feels bad, man. That feels bad. If I roll a human for my character, or I roll 8 humans, like, I just don't think, I'm not an expert game designer. Ivan Sorensen is an amazing game designer. So this little like hang up I have here is completely just like a little thing, like a peeve of mine. But I just like, it's the same thing with Dave Thomabor just made a video about how the synths in Alien are way OP, and it was that way in the original, and in the reboot they didn't change it. And one of the weirdest choices that's made is in the solo mode. It's like, just to make it easier on yourself, you should choose a synth. And the reason for that is because they don't feel fear. But that's the whole point of that game. Why would you take a character that completely eliminates what makes that game exciting? And why is there a character that is completely immune to something that other characters... Like, the problem with that is that it feels bad, man, if I don't have a synth in my party or whatever. So, it's just one of those things where either there's a definitive vision that the author had that's just like, this conforms to the vision, or it might be something where they're like, you know what, it doesn't matter that much. As the game progresses, it doesn't. And in which case I say, well, then why? How can we get it to matter more? Because I want my characters to be different. And then the third option, which I think is most likely, is that one of you who has been gaming since 1874, you are like, you can barely contain yourself. And so you finally now are going to pause the video and write the 600-word explanation of it. Was like, this YouTube creator does not understand the history of how dwarves are used both in a Tolkien setting, but also in tabletop gaming. So let's start with AD&D version 1, technically 1.2. And you know what I say to you, Grognard, writing that comment? I can't wait to read it, because it's going to be so informative. Got it? All right. Let's move on. Rose and a Thorn. If you're a human, what a deal. Break your armor to maybe break a toe instead of an ankle. There's also this thing with the trinket. I won't do it. So you get all of your characters will get the same starting stat lineup, which is 1 agility, 4/+2 speed, which again is just like base speed and then dash, +0 combat skill, 3 toughness, 0 armor. Then you take 4 characters and you can like upgrade each of those 4 characters, like give them, like, one of them will get 1 extra toughness, one of them will get 1 extra combat skill. And then you get these 4 archetypes, which I just really don't get this. It's like the headstrong one has +1 point of will, and the lucky one has +1 point of luck. And it's like, why do these guys get their own titles and these ones just get like +1 combat skill? Why isn't the combat skill one called like the Chuck Norris one? It's just a bit like puzzling to me. I'm almost just like, if there was a rationale for this, it's not apparent to the reader. But the thing that kills me is the bearer. You'd think it would be the novice, because the novice gets nothing. Fine. But the bearer, I can't. They get a trinket. So you roll up this trinket, lucky coin, small book of poetry, and right after the list it says, just so you know, the trinket does nothing. However, sometimes it does. And once per combat, you can hold it close and wish upon a star. And when you do that, you roll a 1d6. And if it's 1 through 5, i.e., 80% chance that nothing happens and your trinket disappears or breaks. But if you get a 6, you can either roll again or take a second turn. And then you could try it again in the next combat. But as soon as you roll anything but a 6, it just goes away. Just don't give me a trinket, man. Like, just don't even give me this option. Because again, it's like, I don't want to build strategy around something that is ultimately so trivial and so likely to do nothing. And so the net effect of things like this are that I'm just going to have this moment where I'm like, okay, well, that was stupid. Like, I would rather just have a trinket. I'd rather that all the characters have a trinket just to kind of like give me an idea about them. This one has a photo of their mother. This one has a little thimble that they've had since they were a child. It's the last thing they were, anyways. I think maybe this is like a tabletop gaming moment where like the two worlds of wargaming and TTRPGs are meeting up, and we're like, why isn't there more story? I would have preferred the trinket to flesh it out a little bit more. And they're just like, go away. Anyways, okay. Then you get the starting equipment. The weapons are divided into just like their quality, which I like. That's something I like as a system, and I'm just very bored by when games do this. It's my one critique of Harper's Quest 2, which is one of the best little games that there is. But it just is not as fun when you're, instead of weapon, like, Flaming Falchion of the Second Dawn is way cooler than like uh, reinforced weapon, quality weapon. It's like, But anyways, you get 2 robust weapons, very, very well seasoned weapons. And then 6 scrap weapons, and both of those are +0/+0. And I'm going to explain what this is, this way that damage is written. Essentially, the only difference between these is that the robust weapons take an extra step to break, whereas the scrap weapons break the first time that you use your special human trait. A self bow, and that's that has range 12 inches. A sling, which is a -1/+0. 5 suits, light armor, 1 shield, 1 helmet. All right. And so you assign that. I gave like my characters. I gave Johnny Darko light armor and a robust weapon because he was novice. He had no other upgrades, Okay. Let me explain how the combat goes, and then I want to talk about runes, and then travel, and then I'll show you how to get the game started. So we have, in combat, we're going to have these 5 phases: initiative roll, quick actions, enemy actions, slow actions, noise phase, tracking. It's a little bit different than 5 leagues, so if you're used to that, it's not a big change. But basically, at the beginning of the combat, you will, however many Warband members you have out there, you're going to roll 8 dice and place those dice in front of them so that you can see how each of them performed. And might I recommend for that miniature like Warhammer like D6 sort of thing, but also I love having different color dice, and just so it doesn't take up a lot of space, if you're making a minis skirmish game, might I recommend some tiny boys. These are great because you have 8, so you need different colors, and you also don't want them to take up too much space on the board. And it is just so fun to roll these. Oh, they're so cute. So take 8 of them, and then you can put them right in front. And basically, any character that is, you can assign them to whatever characters you want. Which, if the character's agility is above, if the dice roll is above their agility, they go during the quick actions phase, phase 2, and if it's not, they go during the slow actions phase. Really simple, really nice. And then there's some like edge cases that tells you how to handle that. And you can get a scouting bonus if you get intel beforehand. When you're within the phase, when you activate, you can move and perform a combat action or a non-combat action. Or if you're a dwarf, you can just cast a spell and do a combat action. And don't worry, even if there's a big bad scary there, you're never afraid. So nice to have a dwarf around, big strong dwarf. You could stand still. You don't have to move, but you cannot change the order and move after taking an action. So once you take an action, it's like taking your finger off the chess piece. And then also in the slow actions phase, it says you can activate the figures in that phase, any order that you like, and do the same activities, just that, right? Like in both phases, you just do it in whatever order you want, but it's just separated by that phase. And you see that in between that phase is the enemy action. So that, what that basically means is this is getting out of hand here. The strategy of this is like, if you have a character that might die during the enemy phase, you probably want to try to get them to act first to either do what they're going to do or get away from the enemies. And by the way, a casualty, I should say, is not necessarily death. It could be just knocked out of commission. All right. And then the noise phase is pretty cool because we're in this dungeon. You have to see, did I arose such a clatter that I alerted other enemies nearby? Tracking phase, basically that's when sort of everything that would happen, that's an automatic effect. Again, if you're playing like a video game, say your character is poisoned, during the tracking phase, you're going to track all of those effects, right? So it's like, okay, your poison took 2, and then you over here, you have some sort of thing that you took that gives you +1 HP every round. You had 3 rounds of quickness spell or whatever, so now you only have 2 rounds left. You basically like bring everything up to speed, all right? And then everything happens when it happens in this game. When you resolve something in the game, all results apply right then. And I'm so glad they said that, because that is one of the things that I always get in my head about. Especially if you just played my Pendragon campaign. And combat, in a way, is so nice because everything is like has a simultaneity, but it's also very confusing sometimes because it's like, well, what happened first? Given the different terrain, that will change how you can move, and also whether there is cover. All right, whether you connect or not is very, very simple. And it's so simple and yet so effective. It made me wonder a little bit why we do anything different than this. All right. So rather than saying, okay, agility is for ranged attacks, strength is for melee, lore or wisdom is for magic, you have your combat skill. That's the modifier. All right. Here's how you find out if you hit somebody. If you are, within 3 inches of that person, there we go. If your target is within 6 inches of you, and that would be 6 squares, and they are not in cover, my roll, whether it has modifiers or not, my 1d6 roll has to be 3 or more. All right. Let me get another buoy. So, this is a good one. A little goblin riding dirty. Well, actually, this one is a little confusing because it takes up 2 spots. Let's do this guy. All right. So we have our wizard here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're within 6. All right. There's no cover. Wizard tries to attack. It's got to be 3 or more. If the target's beyond 6 inches and not in cover, 5+. If the target is in cover at any range, you have to roll a 6+ to hit. Okay. And there's also modifiers to the attacker. For instance, if you are stationary and you're doing a ranged attack, you add your combat skill to the roll. So if my combat skill is 2, I rolled a 6 plus 2 is 8. So he was in cover 12 inches away, still hit him. And so you might be like, well, what's the point of range then? You know, how does range modify anything? Well, for instance, the self bow has a range of 12. That simply means that you can hit somebody even if they're 12 inches away. But if all you have is a mace, you can't do that. And in fact, if you have a mace, you have to be next to them because it's a melee attack. So all that those range weapons allow you to do is to attack from a further distance. If you're moving, by the way, you get no combat skill added. So if you're trying to do like a running, like a run and gun. Roll of a natural 1 is a miss, no effect, no matter what your combat skill is, and a 6 is automatically a hit. And yes, some shots are impossible. If you have no combat skill and the character is in cover and they have something else that adds a +1, you simply cannot roll higher than what's on the die. And so it's impossible. So you should try something else. All right. So, and then melee, the figure that moves into contact base to base is the attacker, and the one that's stationary is the defender. And the melee is fought over a number of exchanges. It's really quite elegant, and I like it for several reasons. All right, so it usually takes place over 3 exchanges. All right, let me actually make sure that take a few notes here for a second. All right. So functionally the same as the 5 Leagues baseline rule set, but it's just, I think, written more cleanly. But it differs from I think it might have been first edition 5 Leagues, which has like a margin of success style of at least explaining this. So every melee consists of up to 3 exchanges. All right. Both combatants are going to roll 1d6 because they're next to each other. They're going to roll 1d6 and add their combat skill and compare results. Whoever is higher scores a hit, lower, no effect. And if there's a tie, it's sort of inconclusive. Push, no effect. If a hit is scored, you immediately go to page 183 has taking injuries, and you figure out what damage happened. But as you can see, in order for a hit to happen, one person has to have a higher roll and another person has to have a lower roll, and we're not dealing with huge numbers here. And with combat skill and everything, if both people, if you have a higher roll, you're going to hit that person. And if they have the lower roll, it's no effect. But if it's a tie, it's inconclusive. This simply means that there's no clear person who should be taking the injury this round, so we do it again. And we can do that again if it's a tie again. And we could do that a third time. But after a third time, we have to disengage. And what I like about this is it prevents like the 3-year-olds with plastic swords, like, this stupid thing that could happen. Even in games that have quite good melee, This happened a lot in like Dragonbane, just because, especially early game, it's just you have a lot of fails, um, and so if the attacker rolls higher, they score a hit. If the defender rolls higher, they avoid being hit. If the result is a draw, the exchange is inconclusive. So that is important right there. We have the attacker and the defender. All right. You could also have a combat bonus if your character's stunned, but essentially, if you push, if you just completed the third exchange in a row, both figures retreat 1 inch. All right. If the attacker scored a hit, the defender must retreat 1 inch. The attacker may remain where they are or step up. So it's like within those 3 exchanges, if I score a hit during that time, I don't have to move. They just get knocked back. All right. Unless you're a dwarf. Nobody pushes a dwarf around. If they step up, they move 1 inch themselves and must move back into contact. They cannot move in any other direction. And enemies will always choose to step up, meaning they will always re-engage. If the exchange was inconclusive, the defender retreats 1 inch, but the attacker must remain in place. All right. Okay. So note that again, because I kind of think I was a little bit missed a step here. If you get through those third exchanges and nobody hits either person, both of you move back. If at any point during those 3 exchanges the attacker scores a hit, the defender retreats 1 inch. And by the way, this does apply to dwarves, because that was the thing that said like that knockback thing does not apply to the normal like engaged melee combat. And the attacker can remain where they are or step up, meaning that you can like give yourself that space, or you can say, nah, man, I want some more. And so you move that 1 inch and you move back into contact, but they can't move in any other direction. So if you are like done attacking, you scored a hit, the defender moves 1 back, you can't be like, well, I'm going to go over here. You're either step up or you stay where you are. And if the defenders win, there's no push. Both figures remain in place. All right. Counterattacks, spell attacks. We'll say a little bit about that. But then taking injuries, we resolve the hits and we see how much damage it is. And this is the thing that I think, at least for me, I stared at it for like 10 minutes and was like, I do not get it. All right. So I'm going to explain it best I can. All right. Melee, up to 3 exchanges. Each exchange, both combatants roll 1d6 plus combat skill. Higher roll scores a hit, lower no effect, tie no effect. Hit is scored, you immediately go to 183 taking injuries, and that's where damage modifiers are applied. If there's no hit, you repeat. These damage modifiers are written in the format of, like plus X. Jeez, that's hard to see. Okay, sorry about that. I could use a marker. There we go. Plus X / plus Y. All right, so it's like +1 + 0 or -1 / 0. And what this means is the first number is like your modifier to your weapon or your fist or whatever hitting their armor, because you have to hit hard enough to bypass the defense of the armor. If you don't need to worry about that second number because you didn't make it through the armor. Okay. So if you do make it through the armor, or they don't have armor, you move to the second number, which is like how your knife does against their skin, so to speak. Okay. So, the either you hit or you don't. This is binary. Damage is this armor toughness test, and that's the first one. Armor, toughness, and toughness is kind of HP. And this would be something that you are going to have to, like any game, you're going to have to see if a hit happened And then was the hit significant enough to get through their armor and injure them? And it works well. I think just in terms of a how it feels, it just feels more productive than that weird despairing grind that happens in this happened in 5e all the time, where it was just like, all right, your turn, great, and you did not hit. Okay, next person. Okay, great, and no hit, no hit, no hit, no hit, no hit. It works better than that. It feels like even early in the game that there's a nice rhythm to that. So, if the target's wearing armor, you're going to roll a 1d6, and you'll add the damage bonus. Okay, so this will say if your weapon is +1/0, when you roll that first 1d6 against armor, you add 1. Okay, and if the result is above their armor rating, which is going to be very easy early on with your characters, because the most any of your characters have is, I think, a 2. They all start with 0, but some of them, I think, have a 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0. So, yeah, 1. So it's not going to be very hard other than a truly squandered roll, or one with a bad modifier. But yeah, if the result's above it, you go to step 2, which is you then have to overcome toughness. And if the result is equal to the armor rating, the target's stunned. All right, and that means that they're reeling from the strike. And if the armor is the result's below it, target's unaffected. No further effects. I just want to say, sometimes we forget that this is a solo game. And so things like the resolving hits, where it's like, well, why does the defender get such a raw deal? Like, what about when they have to attack? They're not real. They're, you know what I mean? They're like, there's only you. So we want to make it such that, like, you are the one that is able to initiate that combat. And yeah, the enemies are going to initiate it too, but that's just based on the basic AI, field AI of, like, they're going to move closer. And there is some comment on that. Being wounded has once you get through that armor, you do the toughness thing, and instead of comparing it to the armor rating, you are going to add that second damage bonus, which in this example is +0. You roll the 1d6. If it exceeds their toughness, now this was kind of surprised when I first read this, but then when I thought about it, I was like, oh, cool. If it exceeds their toughness, it's a casualty. So if you exceed their armor, if you get a successful hit, right? You roll over either the 3, the 5, the 6, depending on their distance, their cover, etc. You get that hit, you overcome the armor, and you overcome their toughness, they're dead. There's no HP change. And so you're like, damn, that's it? It's like, yeah, but think about that. That is actually, like, more in line with how things would go. Right? I mean, I think about a game where you're just stabbing someone 60 times until you whittle their HP down. So this gives a lengthy, satisfying combat, but it's also more abridged, not only because you're going to disengage after 3, this isn't working, let's just take a step back and think about if we really want to kill each other. So that is, stepping out of the batter's box actually makes it quicker because you can make different decisions. And then also it's like, all right, jump over this fence, you jumped over that, now this fence, now this one, you got all 3, casualty. And again, that doesn't mean they're dead necessarily. We would check the injury during that famous injury roll that humans, if they want to, maybe they'll roll twice. Oh, they had a headache? Nah, let's roll again. Now their left arm exploded and they can't take it back. But they don't have to worry because their sword melted as well. Tell you what, man, it's just not easy being a human. All right, so yeah, they can still be stunned or wounded though. So you know, you still go. We don't want to send you home without any prize. So that's the other side of it is cool system. But if nothing happened, that would feel equally futile. So there is like the ability to stun them or wound them, which can make it easier to either make them run away or to get them the next time. Okay, so in the rune magic is essentially kind of cool. I wonder how it'll feel like after playing for a month. But essentially, there are two effects of runes, or two categories of effects. Find them here. Oh, by the way, wounds do not carry over to future scenarios. That's how you say it, right? Scenario. All right, so you got this rune magic. The way that they explain it is they're like, hey, in 5 leagues, people practice the magic. I kind of love this. It's a bit ridiculous, but they're like, yeah, in this game, though, magic doesn't work down here because it's so, like, muggy. Or, like, there's not a lot of light, or it's very damp. I love that. It's just like the wand is sparking. So instead, there's these casting the runes. And any character can use these runes by taking a casting action, except dwarves. They just carte blanche. And so essentially, unless they're modified by power runes, and I'll explain what that means, a spell affects a single target, and they have to be within 6 inches. All right, and this is if you have a rune that you cast, that's it. Anybody can do it. Only certain people can make them, and you can make them once per campaign turn. Character in your party that makes them is the rune mystic, and other people can become that if it says forego an advancement roll or seclude themselves for 3 campaign turns, taking them off the table to use. So you have these function runes, and they produce 6 broad effects: binding, destruction, healing, repulsion, shifting, tunneling. Which I guess is broad categories of like spell effects. Again, generic, just like the weapons, which I get it. 6 one, half dozen another. But I don't know. I would rather have, the Hammer of Dawn than shifting. But the function runes do the work, and then the power runes amplify them. That's why it said, like, if there's no power runes, it's one enemy 6 inches away. But these power runes, when you combine them and use them together, you can duplicate the spell, make it cast twice, or you can add reach to it, which extends it 6 inches. You can repeat it. It allows the spell to take turn 2 rounds in a row. So there's a lot of cool strategy with that. For instance, like using a healing spell, adding it to a power rune, and you can cast both of them together. So, it's a nice consideration of like, should I cast this thing that lasts 2 rounds, or are my characters going to die? Like if I cast it on somebody, are they going to be, so it's got a nice strategy to it. I just think like a few things in Deep Below as opposed to 5 Leagues, the flavor has to come more from us. But I think it's a nice, in these sort of systems, things can get really generic. And I appreciate the fact, and I love Ironsworn, Starforged, but sometimes when you're everything, your game is also nothing, right? Like we've talked about this before. The only thing we know about Starforged is that like you come from a place called the Forge, which is a little offshoot because the Milky Way blew up or whatever. That's really the only lore. Otherwise, the lore is completely made by you, which is fine if you're into that. I prefer a game where at least there's some sort of set reality already there when I show up, just because that makes it a game. That makes it a vision and not just, a guide or a tool set. So there's more that I could be said. The runes and potions are shared in kind by everybody. Otherwise, there's inventory rules. Um, and I really do like the system for in these campaigns. On the campaign turn, you have a scenario, right? And so when you have these scenarios, the way that this is set up, and once I realized that this was like how this went, I I was like, cool. This is cool. This is actually cool. So basically, you're gonna have 3 sequences in the campaign turn: battle sequence, scenario, post battle. The pre-battle sequence, you're gonna recover from injuries, repair damaged equipment, identify items, right? If they're magic items, and there is a good, I believe, unless I just made this up, I believe there is like some actual listed magic items. I don't know if that was in a, maybe that was in a third-party thing. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You can recruit, right? Especially if you lose a member. Visit the sage, check for difficult battles, determine whether to attempt a side quest, right? So you have this kind of like downtime. And here is where I would definitely role play and get to know these characters better. But you're going to rearrange for gear, deploy battle. I do think that my changes that I am going to make before I get into it, and I'm going to play a few more of Deep Below, by the way, and I'll see if this is like a sort of a long-term thing, or if 5 leagues is the better choice, or maybe 5 parsecs. That I never fully played that game. I did, but I didn't really. I think I played like what would be called a fractured session. If you ever played something where you get through like a whole session, but it was so fractured and like piecemeal that I don't feel like I played. I feel like I just kind of uh, like I finally finished my IKEA bookcase, and I know that I put a bunch of stuff backwards, and I was missing 3 screws, and I was like, all right, well, I guess that's the Kierganier Cafilier bookcase. Okay. So here's how this goes. You have this scenario, right? And you're gonna there's instructions for like if you want setting up where there's doors and everything like that. For myself, I feel pretty okay just like distributing it, putting stuff here and there and everywhere. I'll use that thing to kind of, because it basically sets things by latitude and longitude or the different sides. I'm not worried about me like doing home cooking where I'll be like, oh, well, my characters are starting here. I'm going to make a bridge to the treasure chest, which has a bunch of magic maces. So how you want to do that, there are instructions for that. I think that tends to slow me down when I start getting into that. But you essentially have this scenario and you're going to build it up, and you're going to have these different areas, and this sort of setup works great because let's show you how to do this. All right, so this is, take these characters off the board. Essentially, you'll determine your like location that you're playing this. There's different locations because we have this overland map, like I said, and you really don't want to over determine that map. Like what I would recommend and what the book recommends, it's good lesson here, is draw like rather than drawing the roads or the tunnels and everything, like trying to do that, instead make some features. So on the map that I was using yesterday, it's like I put in a mushroom forest, and over here was just kind of this like craggy area. Here, I didn't even know what it was. I just put these like blocks that could have been a cemetery. I never got there, but it could have been a little underground village. Over here, it looks like a crawfish, but it was supposed to be like a spiral staircase. Here's a chasm. Here's some sort of ballroom that turned out to be a former mustering hall for troops. Over here, maybe an altar. Here's like a little lake. Here's a river and some bridges. Just build like, and then you want to put the base camp somewhere. Build or fill in like features like that. But don't name them and don't connect them yet. Because what will happen as you do this map is it will say, oh, to your left is a city. And you're like, oh no, I already have a city there. It's like, don't call that a city yet. That's just an area where mushrooms grow, and you could draw in a city and then connect it as you're doing it. And it's an underground cavern. They recommend doing it sideways, which I think is somewhat interesting. Like, I suppose if you feel like you'd have a good handle on that, it could be good. I think some people might see that as easier. But just so you could see how that would look if you do it to the side, this, I think Gunderholfen had. Yeah, so this is like a side view. Or maybe something like this. It's good examples. But yeah, leave it a little bit under determined. All right. So you're going to choose the delve site. You choose the delve site. Depending on the site, it's going to have different size, different features, different things, etc. Once you get in that site, you are going to put these battlefield features. All right. They are intangible. They're like markers, you know, like they'd be floating arrows in a video game. And you can, I think here for those, it is good to either do what makes sense or to use like the latitude, longitude dice roll, and however that'll work for you. But you are going to have usually 5 features. And actually, you could have more than 5, but that number will be important. So say we got one here. This one we'll say is a peculiar feature. And then this one is an investigation. And we'll do another investigation here. And then what's the third type is wanderers. Let's see, maybe there's one right there. Or you don't even have to name these features. You could just say, this is a feature, and I'll roll and figure out what it is when I get there. We'll say there's something right here. And then also we'll say these are noise markers. Okay. And if you have any side quests, etc. So what you're going to do is you're going to traipse around, and you are going to move through this. And as you move, at least the option that I chose was as you're moving, you can have random encounters. All right. This whole thing is preparing the table for a scenario and how to do it. So you're going to determine exits first. You're going to see how many ruins there are. All right. And then show like rubbled buildings. You don't have to do that like that. It's just, for instance, I'm just going to use this map. Like, I'm not going to go out of my way to shift the walls of this map. And then it tells you how to put down all of these different markers and stuff. Okay. So some of this stuff is you won't have them on every scenario. Some of the stuff you'll have more than one. Some of the stuff it may come up based on another thing that happens. And so as you move around, you're dealing, maybe you find some stuff, you fight some stuff. You go in here and you find out this is a noise marker. What you do then is you go to the noise marker table, and it's a D100 table, and you roll it and you resolve it. So let's do an example. The silly putty. There's a little more silly putty. It's not. There's also campaign events that you can do, and there's all sorts of stuff that I would highly recommend just doing it, because if it's too hard, it's too hard, but it shouldn't all be like difficult stuff. Okay. So, yeah, so some of these scenarios are going to be easy, some of them are going to be just be like checks, and some of them are going to be difficult, which often means there's either like a trap or an enemy. And you determine like what you've encountered. And so that one's investigations. What did we say this was? A noise marker? Wanderer. Just because a noise marker is a little bit different. Let's do that. We'll say that the red one here is a peculiar feature. All right. So I'm going to roll a D100. All right. So this is a peculiar feature we found here. And I'm going to roll a D100. So 52. You find an opportunity to take initiative in the battle. Select a character and an enemy within their line of sight. That character may move twice, and when that enemy would next activate, it may not move or take any actions. That has to be the one out of all of these. The one result that does not make any sense. How did that just happen to me? Let me do another one, and then I'll explain why that one makes no sense. Just my luck. I actually wonder if that will be errata, because I'll explain why in a second. So let's just say, I rolled a 14. You find a winding tunnel that leads out of here. Mark the location as an exit. The character finding it may choose to immediately leave the battle if you like. So there should be something that is discovered. And we should also remember that, like, because all of this is happening in this area, the whole scenario is a battle, right? You're going to be moving around this stuff, and you're going to be like making your way from one to the next, resolving them. And you have to resolve 5 of them to succeed at the scenario. So you're trying to move around, and these are all going to give you different things. Some of them are going to be good things. Some of them are going to be make things more difficult. The line of sight, the one that I read first, line of sight, it does basically what that would mean is you are able to like change your luck. You're able to just suddenly have a line of sight and whatever. But the thing that's confusing about that is it has no lead in to that. Like, there's usually something like, oh, there's a partial collapse. It turned out to be a clump of underworld foliage. There are strange gases. You find an odd little trinket. So that one, it has like no intro. It's just like, you found a line of sight. It's like, what? What? On who? On what? But I do see that there's another one like that. So maybe the way that that was written, it's just the assumption that you are going to be constantly engaged. But again, this is part. By the way, does this not look awesome? Like it's actually a spotlight broadcasting that. Anyways, this is the part I think that there would be some desperation of understanding by somebody who only or primarily plays tabletop role-playing games, which is, I mean, you saw it. Like the surprise I had probably would not have been present if I was just a wargamer, because the wargamer sees this board right here as a battle zone. And so like, okay, I have to go and resolve these things. All right, so I'm just going to like move. Oh, here's an obstruction. Okay, move. Got that. All right, next. Okay, we got an enemy coming right here. I'm going to try to get out in time, and I'm going to try to, I'm going to lead him off at the pass so I can shoot. a role player is going to think of this as like a dungeon crawl. And so the fact that there is an enemy over here making their way, you might think like, oh, this got nothing to do with me, you know, when I run into that enemy. But like that enemy, hypothetically, it's solo, but they can also see the whole board. So they're trying to move towards you. And so essentially, even though it will functionally still act that way, as if you're making your way through these caverns, like to find these different things and discover them. So you're going to have wanderers. Some of them might join your fight. Some of them might be hidden enemies. All of these things are going to change the situation a little bit. But when you're generating the cavern, all right, you're going to generate the enemies. And by the way, wanderers move. So like if a wanderer starts here during the tracking phase or whatever phase it says, you have to move them 4 inches. So they're also going to be moving around. And you have to resolve them. And that term resolve means whatever it means for that thing. If that wanderer, I'm not sure if this is one for a wanderer, but this would actually be really cool. So the wanderer could be an enemy, and resolving that interaction means taking them out. The wanderer could be somebody who needs to be protected, which means resolving that would mean getting them to an exit or something before they die. You have to resolve 5 of these. And if you fail at one, you should go try to resolve another one until you run out of ones to resolve or you get a casualty. Once you finish, you could tally up what you got, and eventually you can start generating side quests that have their own flavor, like a desperate villager, a treasure hunter. And this is where I think things get really good and really flavorful, because you start to have these really fun missions on the side quests. These are like, this is the grind. I mean, it's not a grind in as far as like you don't feel miserable, but the side quests are enemy champion, enemy gathering, hunt down, investigate, patrol mission, roaming horror, search for clues, treasure hunt, provide security, and then all these different like randomized rewards. Okay. So I just think it's really fun. And it's going to give you the step-by-step here for that combat where it's like determine exits, determine the ruins, and the ruins are the sort of like locations within this battlefield. And again, what I would do here is I just would use the map. And if I had, let's say, what are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. If there are 14 rooms here, not even including the hallway, I would try to use some sort of marker to say like, okay, if there are 4 ruins, I would say like, all right, this marker is where like the sunken church is. And this area right here, you know, just generally, because it doesn't matter as much, just so that you know that you're like generating whatever is in that ruin as the random occurrence there. Okay. But yeah, these enemy encounter tables, there's a generating the enemy section on 228, and it's great. So this is, you can randomize the whole creature's stat profile, and then you could also check their presence. Are they passing through? Are they scavenging? Are they trying to camp? Are they hunting? Are they migrating? All right. And then you could add traits to them. And what is their nature? Humanoid, ooze, reptile, and their, like, what class are they? There's some optional variations, and then it will give this post-battle sequence as well, where you can calculate the victory, see how much loot you got, etc. This section walks you through it all the way. And so just follow these lists and follow the tables, and then one day you'll get some magical gear. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. So does it say what the magical gear is called, or did I make that up? Magical gear is a catch-all term for any magical item that is not a weapon, rune, or potion. It can take almost any form, from belts and rings to wands and gemstones. Oh, darn it. It just describes it as major use or minor use. Well, look, again, we're just giving the cues for the movie in our head, so. And then how to make custom scenarios, how to move it to 5 leagues, campaign encounter table. Okay, so to review, you've made your warband. You read enough of the instructions to get started. What are you going to do to start the game? What are you going to do first? You know what? This next part, I'm going to try to make it like a professional YouTube video so that I can tag it in the description. Let's see how I do. Hey there, you've decided to skip ahead to the part where you're ready to play. Hey, I get it. You're excited. And 5 Leagues from the Borderlands is awesome. And Deep Below ain't too shabby. So one of the biggest questions we get as solo players is, how do I start? Or how do I start once I've started? You've made your warband, and let's start by just making sure that we have completed that completely by finalizing your warband. You have 8 characters. You've given them a name, their origin, full stat line, agility, combat, etc. Make sure that you've given them a starting weapon and armor from the shared inventory per who you want to get that. You can distribute it as you'd like. Just make sure you follow the rules about how many pieces of equipment a person can have at the same time. But you're going to have those 2 robust weapons, 6 scrap weapons, self-bow, sling, 5 light armors, a shield, and a helmet to divide. Then you're going to pick 1 rune mystic. Choose 3 function runes and 2 power runes to get you started. A little suggestion I have is that the game rules as written says that anybody can use these runes, but only the rune mystic can create them. I think that I found that quite general, and so I instituted what is called the rune aspirant. And you can decide, especially if you have a character that's like maybe a little underdeveloped compared to the others, go ahead and make 2 of them rune mystics. One of them a rune mystic and 2 of them rune aspirants. And a rune mystic can make and use runes. A rune aspirant can use runes. In order to make a character a rune mystic, you either have to forego an advancement phase or spend 3 days in cloistered silence. However, in order to make someone a rune aspirant, go ahead and knock that down to just 1 day. Additionally, if someone's a rune aspirant for at least 1 day and you wish to make them into a rune mystic, you only have to do 2 extra days. What this does is it separates and specializes your characters. However, it certainly would be a lot easier if everybody could use those runestones. So if you'd like to play it as written, those are the rules. Feel free. I just like to know who the magic users are. And after you figure out about the rune mystic and create the runes that you want, go ahead and make sure that you have your other final starting stuff: 0 gold marks, 15 determination, 0 quest discovery, and 5 story points. Your roster is complete. Now you're ready to start and play. All right, so now you got to draw or at least imagine the settlement. Every Deep Below campaign is going to begin at your settlement. That's the last safe pocket of resistance and civilization underground. At this early stage, your settlement is mostly conceptual. It doesn't have special structures yet, but one day soon you'll have a healer and a smithy. But you're going to gain them as your campaign progresses. This is your home base between adventures, and you can return there between adventures. I want to note that travel in Deep Below is not like it is in 5 Leagues from the Borderlands core game. You actually are just going to abstract the travel between different locations, i.e. your settlement and the different delve sites that you find. So you want to start with a quite abstracted general map, and then as you discover more, as you resolve more of the runes and gain more acclaim and power and discover new places, you'll be able to expand that map, and you certainly want to leave space for that. So you could draw a side view, a top-down cave, and Mark your settlement in one corner. I would roll about 3 or 4 flavor locations. Use the tables on page 198. Ones I did were like Mushroom Forest, Abandoned Mines, Ruined Halls, Underground Lake, and number those. Another little suggestion I have that doesn't exactly say this in the rules, but maybe just make a drawing and don't label it yet. For instance, on the map that I made, I did this area there that I just kind of put some squares in a clearing. And I don't know whether those are like a cemetery right there or if they're like a little town. You can leave that open-ended and make that determination based on what makes the most sense when you get there. But you want to have 3 notable locations using the notable locations table in 199. And what those are sort of like set pieces. They can be at different places on your map, but they are going to be relatively consistent between campaigns. And those are used to sort of propagate, to transmit the story or the lore, or at least the setting of the game. All right. And then you're ready to begin your first campaign turn. Okay, so this is not a combat phase or anything. It's the basic highest level turn sequence of the game. Each of these campaign turns has 3 major phases: pre-battle, the scenario, and post-battle. Pre-battle on page 203. Guys, I think I'm doing well. I took pretty good notes. For your first ever turn, skip your injury checks and repairs. You obviously don't need to do that. You're at full health and goods. You don't really have anything to repair. And you can, during this phase, recruit, but you already have your 8 characters, so skip that. You can visit the Sage, but your settlement probably doesn't have one yet, so skip that. You can determine if you'll take a side quest, but you don't have any side quest points, so you can skip that. You can rearrange your gear, which you don't really need to do that right now because, your stash is not near. You could deploy for battle. Select up to 8 characters for the scenario, and in this case, that is your full warband. You'll then move on to your scenario, which is page 206 to 224, and in this is where the tabletop battle begins. You want to set up your first battlefield. Play on a 2x2 or 3x3 area, but size can vary to what your needs and preferences are. You want to place 1 to 4 ruins or sort of rocky features, scattered terrain, and 3 noise markers within 6 inches of the center of the board. I recommend that you just get a few different simple things like coins or whatever, little plastic pieces here to represent different things. But remember, these are abstract, intangible. They're just marking something on a map. They're not actually going to obstruct line of sight or take up space. And you are also going to roll or choose peculiar features and investigation markers. Each of these is going to represent an event, a clue, a treasure, and you have to resolve 5 of these to be successful. You're also going to randomly determine exits. Usually it says there are 1 to 3 per edge of map, and that will seem a bit excessive, but you should probably at least put 1 on every edge because one of the things that will be a strategic maneuver is getting the hell out of there if you are getting the crap beat out of you, and you will need to move to an exit to do that. Your victory condition, as stated, very simple: resolve, meaning reveal and complete 5 markers of any kind. Noise markers, peculiar, investigation. You have to do that before you are wiped out. Then you'll do the post-battle sequence on page 233, where you resolve loot from investigations, roll for injuries and recovery, gain XP and story points, check for new side quests, update your map and warband sheet, and go to the bathroom in real life. That last part's just my recommendation. Between adventures, this is when your battle ends, so your warband automatically returns to the settlement. You don't have to travel back on that map, and you can mark that explored area that you were at, if you succeeded, as cleared. Now you want to add some newly discovered notable locations, and if you have the points, side quests. You don't have to do those right away, but this is the way that the world reveals itself slowly This is very exciting, along with the ability to develop your settlement. You're going to get more and more information. More of the fog of war and I guess fog of settlement will be lifted, and you're going to update your determination and gold marks if that is appropriate. So we got it. Create your warband, assign equipment, runes, sketch your campaign map, add 3 notable locations and about 4 flavor locations, start the campaign turn, skip just about everything, make sure your team is equipped, play your first scenario, set up the terrain, 3 noise markers, enter through a random exit, explore, resolve 5 markers, win, get the hell home, figure out what your loot is, XP, do your recovery, check out your new quests, update your map settlement determination, and repeat as desired until you, my friends, are also a casualty. Damn it, I didn't stick the landing. Thank you for joining me, and I hope this was helpful. Bye-bye.